So these type of issues set a standard for Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, the Imam, that wrongly sets a situation where people feel they have to go out of their way to attack him. That by attacking him, that establishes Ahlul Sunnah.
Right.
And I can tell you without any doubt, the people that have reviled him or make it their business to revile him, none of them turn out like too good.
Allahu Akbar.
They just don't. And it's the same thing over and over again, because if you spend all your time doing that, you don't have time to memorize Quran or study fiqh, because your heart is so filled with that angst and anger to do that. You don't have time to study anything else. So you find one person that's what he specializes in. That's it. He has no time for anything else. Then on the other side, you have sycophants that they've spent so much time doing, they don't have any other knowledge because they're trapped within that cage. And so they see through this prism of Taqi ibn Taymiyyah when he never intended that at all. Ibn al-Qayyim, Ibn Rajab, Ibn Kathir didn't intend that at all. The Zahabi didn't intend that at all. That wasn't the intent. The intent was of Imam Taqi ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, and his ijtihads that he made was to try to get to the center of discussions and things that he felt weren't ijma, but merely things that people had accepted without cross-examining. And he did sometimes expose people that said things were ijma that weren't ijma, and he proved that was not true. And he did expose people for corrupting a hadith, like saying that this, like interpolating words into a hadith. No, the text of the hadith is this, but because they've been interpolating things like, oh yes, and Allah's rahmah, it comes down, and everything else, it's like, no, it says that his nuzul, but they kept interpolating rahmah in there, even though that doesn't occur in those ahadith. So for some people, that was the first time seeing the actual lafaz of the hadith on the nuzul. And that's why he did that. So when Al-Aqidah al-Wasiti, he's just quoting these ayat, it's like, well, what's the purpose of why he's quoting all these ayat? We know they're in there. Yeah, but for some people, that may have been the first time seeing those ayat. For some people, it was the first time seeing those ahadith in black and white vellum paper. Look, here they are. And then he's like, this is collected by Imams Abu Dawud, Al-Bukhari, Muslim, and Tirmidhi. There's also an alternative wording in the Tabarani that's even more explicit that reads. Like, he's like giving the takhrij of all these to say, listen, they're in there. They're in there. And this is why Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, they couldn't say anything. Other than the fact that they disagree with them, they couldn't say anything really. Because Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani quotes Taqi ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah in Fath al-Bari.
Yes.
He cites him on at least 4 occasions. And he mentions him in the Durul al-Kamida, which is a biographical notice. And there's nothing in there about him being a kafir or whatever else, but he does cite some of the nadir or unacceptable statements. And he says, I don't know what to say at this point. That's the only thing he says, I don't know what to say at this point.
Is it in this book? I'm not sure, but I've seen some quotes that so supposedly that Imam Taymiyyah disparaged Ahlul Bayt. Is there any truth to this?
No. His issue was Imam Taqi ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah's hostility was towards 3 things. Number 1, Shiites who claim lineage to Ahlul Bayt, because his Kitab Minhaj al-Nabawiyah was a staunch attack on Shiites and their beliefs. Number 2, false claimants to Ahlul Bayt, which we see a lot today. Everyone's Ahlul Bayt. Right. Number 3 is the Ahlul Bayt of his time, because during his time, the most upright people were the Seljuks in terms of combat. And Ibn Kathir mentions this, the Imam rahimahullah al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, that the Ahlul Bayt were actually driving people away from Mecca and al-Medina, like they were scaring the people of Hajj and charging them like exorbitant rates and doing really harsh things to them during this time. And the Seljuks had to come and stop that.
SubhanAllah.
So you have to apply the principles and a lot of these things. And there were other things that came into force that weren't impermissible, but you wonder, why did this come in? Like for example, doing the salat and salam before the adhan. Ibn Kathir narrates the historicity of that. That's been going on for like 800 years, but it started at Masjid al-Aqsa.
SubhanAllah.
But it's like, okay, well, why though? No one can tell you why. It was done one day and they just keep doing it since that day. But there's some slaves of Allah that have seen it done. What do? They carry it back to their own countries like it's a sunnah, and they start doing it.
Yes.
So when I visit a northern part of the United Kingdom one day and people are doing it before the adhan, I said, why are you doing it before the adhan? Oh, it's a sunnah. Oh, is it? To which my response is, what's the takhrij on that? So then people start treating you like you're a Jew or a Christian because you're asking for takhrij on these things when you have a right to ask, because when you rebuke people and say something's a sunnah, that means obviously there's some mustanid in the religion. Yeah. So I have to ask, where's this coming from? So they say, well, I went to al-Masjid al-Aqsa in the year so and they were doing it. Since when did that become a hujjah? They also had rocket launchers at the door. They were shooting at the Jews. You got rocket launchers?
Oh.
I mean, what exactly are we doing? If you were talking about the first 3 generations and then that's different. Yeah, I saw an amal, I read about this amal and some people did it. Okay, all right. I can't argue that. Yeah, I read that the amal that the muhajirun, when they were leading the salah, the muhajirun, they made 1 tasneem on the right in the Fard salah. Okay. That's undisputed. That's undisputable.
Yes.
No one can argue that. But you're talking about something you saw 700 years, something you read about 700 years ago, or some amal that's been going on for 700 years. Okay. But you don't carry that back and say it's sunnah.
So
because there's no text for it, because Ibn Kathir mentions when it happened because he witnessed it occur. That's why he wrote about it in Bidayah. He witnessed it occur that first time and how it kept occurring thereafter. And he said, and I don't know why this is happening. Now, to this day, they still do it. And then before Salatul Jum'ah, they'll have Quran playing on loudspeakers and everything else, which is there'd be men that would be outside reciting Quran in loud voices in the Jum'ah. It's an amal they've kicked up. Now listen, it's not harmful if they do it, but it's not a sunnah either.
Right. It's like a permissible innovation, you can say.
Yeah, it's something that's permitted. It's not a sunnah. So
right.
So no one should say, "Oh, I'm going to do that when I go." Why though?
Or somebody saying you have to do it because
you should do it.
You should do
and
it.
And if you don't, you're missing out. What am I missing out on?
Exactly. Yes.
It'd be different if you say, listen, you should read more Quran. It's good for you. Read more Quran. And you should send more salat and salam upon him on Jum'ah because he said, yeah, okay. And then you quote the hadith. Listen, there's send the additional salat and salam upon me on Friday because it reaches me. Yeah, there's no argument about that. That's sound. You can't fight that. But when you see an amal that's just gained traction,
yes,
and then you insist that this amal, it's these types of things that became amal. Another thing was the head of Al-Hussein, where it's buried. In the time of Imam Taqi ibn Taymiyyah Al-Hanbali, there were 7 places that claimed they had his head.
Wow.
And they were all charging people money to see it.
Subhanallah.
So when this was happening, he attacked that. He also attacked superstition. So there was that message that you sent me before about the individual about sihr, right? And it's because of this superstition about sihr. The superstition about charms and amulets and magic. Superstition about tying knots over things or wear this bracelet with knots in it. It will protect you. What? He attacked a lot of these things. Numerology, he attacked. Astrology, he attacked. There were some people getting into astrology in his time period. So not everything that he stood against and attacked was he dead wrong on.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And there has to be an ability where we look through some of the smoke that he created because of some of the other things that have been done, and to be able to see some of the other things. No, he was right there, because there were some things that were being done that you couldn't. Particularly one of his students, Ahmad Al-Wasiti, who I cited regarding in the class on hospitality,
mm-hmm.
and about the corruption of the Sufi brotherhoods.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the students of Taqi ibn Taymiyyah Rahimahullah.
Oh.
And he left the Tariqah that he was in because of sexual abuse and other things that he witnessed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't wrong about that. There was abuse, and there were liars. Just like Ibn Rajab Rahimahullah rightly pointed out that Shantufi lied about Shaikh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani Rahimahullah about attributing things to him that he never said and that he never did.
Oh.
He did lie. Now, I don't know about what he is in terms of fiqh or whatever else, but when it comes to the life of Shaykh Abu Ja, he lied because he didn't know anybody that knew the Shaykh or anything else. So where would he have gotten this information? He lied, period, point blank. You see, so not everything that dust cloud kicked up was completely baseless.
So the point that you're making is basically he has done correct refutations, but people take these things out of context to use it somehow against him.
Well, I would say that what's happened was his mistakes have been used to overshadow
okay.
a lot of the other things that he did say.
Mm-hmm, right.
And because some of those superstitions are still alive and well today,
yes.
He's used as an ugly stick to beat people with, to try to stop you from questioning it.
SubhanAllah.
So if you question these things, or you question some of the superstitious drivel that's happening today, they call you a Taymiyan.
Right.
Or they call you these other words, right, which are designed to break your morale or to make you be silent or to stop doing what you're doing. But in point of fact, nothing is further from the truth, because in reality, when you look at his final book, Kitab ul-Iman al-Kabir, that all lines up with Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. That's his final work. That all lines up with Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. That's like his final complete work. Regarding the names and attributes, the prophets, all that. That all lines up. There's still the section there about ziyarah, and he's still held on to that stuff pretty tightly. There's about 5 or 6, maybe 7 masail, fiqh masail, kind of, that he kind of held to. But regarding the knowability of Allah's names and attributes, the infallibility of the prophets, the state of the fire, the creation, the essence of Allah, he let go of those.
So the fiqh issues are less severe than the i'tiqad issues, because we can simply say it's just not the mu'tamad.
Yes, but there are some fiqh issues where, no, we can't abide by that because they contravene consensus as well, like 3 talaq in 1 sitting, or his position on Safar, that Safar has no distance that's been mandated for it. That is just completely untenable. Because if someone says, okay, well, I work 10 minutes from my house and I feel exertion on my journey and I feel tired, I'm going to shorten, my salah. Right? Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, the Imam Rahimahullah would hold that to be valid, but you can't do this because he makes the assumption that Safar implies mashaqqa, that you undergo difficulty. But it's nothing to do with that. He attached that condition. So he said, someone might feel difficulty at journeying from this location. So if someone's like, oh, I have to fight my way, when the commute to work, my commute from the house to work is, 25 minutes. Oh, subhanAllah, it takes me an hour to get into the office place. Yeah, but you're only like 10 miles from your house. It's an hour because it's bumper to bumper traffic. Yeah, but it's, it feels like 48 miles, or it feels like, subhanAllah, it feels like this, right? So people will say, I have to do, or I'm going to do qasr. It's like, no, you can't do that. Or normally how people would wipe over the amama when you have wudu, yes? His position about wiping over would be, his rare ruling is that someone, if they're wearing like a tarbush or a tall tarbush, they can wipe over that. It's like, well, no, that contravenes everything else. Or if someone makes wudu and they wipe over the khuf, then they take the khuf off for some reason, they put them back on, their wudu still intact. No, it's not. Right? There's just certain like rulings like that no, you cannot abide by that.
Like, didn't he also have an opinion that if you wipe over the sock, it can even have holes in it? It will still valid.
Yes, and he also held the position that if you take pieces of cloth and wrap them around your foot, right, and they cover the area of the fault of the wudu, this is fine. It's like, no, this is not fine.
Yeah, it doesn't meet the conditions.
No, it doesn't meet the conditions. These conditions have already been established. So there's no adder like this that he has that you simply cannot abide by. And say, yes, but what does it matter if it's ijtihad? Because you just mentioned the hadith of a Muslim regarding this. Yes, but where the people have come together and established ijma, or they've established an authoritative ruling, you can't then come behind that. Because when authoritative things have been established, you can't say, well, I disagree. No. Ijma is a nas, just like an ayah or a hadith. Surah An-Nisa, the 4th surah, 115, 116, is clear in that regard, that whoever follows other than the way of the messenger, after it's been made clear to him, follows the way other than the believers, shall be turned over to that way and roasted in the fire with an evil homecoming. That shows not only contradicting the messenger, was sabil al-mu'mineen, but the way of the believers can get you put in the fire. Which means that ijma is a nas. It's a decisive text. So they come together on something as a nas and establish it. You can't come and say, well, I disagree.
Yes, exactly.
But listen, if you're a mujtahid, you made a mistake. Listen, you're mistaken in your ijtihad, that's fine. But we still can't abide by your ruling.
Yes.
Allah reward you, you made your ijtihad, you were mistaken in your ijtihad because you thought it was this and it was that, and okay, that's fine. But we can't abide by that. We have to leave that alone. So these are the things that people have to be very mindful of. But what's happened is, as people are translating, they're translating these works, or they're translating sections of the Imam, but not within its context. It's the same thing. It's so sometimes I'll walk into like a Muslim bookshop when I come out every now and then, and I'll see like they've translated something else by Ibn Arabi Muhyiddin. It's like, why? There's no footnotes. There's no introduction. It's just there. At least if the Arabic was in the text as well, people could, work with it. But it's not. They'll translate Taqi ibn Taymiyyah like something from him. It's just there. Well, wait a minute. He belongs to an entire tradition. There's an entire set of precepts that this man belongs to, and an entire basis that he belongs to. And sometimes he'll say within that book, you've heard me say this before. However, I would like to mention that at this point, I want you to consider this. Well, consider what? Where did he say it before? You've heard me say this in a number of places. What number of places? Well, He's expecting you to know. But it's just kind of left just hanging in the air.
Mm.
Now, it's one thing where there's certain imams that they wrote their kutub in a fashion in which it could be widely diffused.
Mm.
And it didn't matter.
Right.
But Imam Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, from his writing style and from the students and people around him, you could tell that he did not write for that purpose.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can tell that he didn't. You can also tell because when he was at his Masjid Qissisin, the Masjid of the priests, that he never got married and had children. And some of the people around him didn't marry and have children because of their dedication to the knowledge. It's obvious that what he's doing is something that's different and out of the norm of what you would expect. But it's not that part of it's not being really appreciated. So when we look at these people, we have to look at them as a whole. They're not mavericks. They're not sort of outliers where they've just got sort of their own tradition. They belong to something. There is no Taqi ibn Taymiyyah madhhab. There is no madhhab of the Salaf. The Salaf is a time period which covers 3 generations. It's not a madhhab that it laid down some books and that that's not what it is. The Salaf is an era. So when Taqi ibn Taymiyyah is talking about he follows the way of the Salaf, means what they laid down. The time period and what that belongs to, what they laid down. So when people are seeing discussion, like al-Dhahabi quotes, at-Tariqah Salafiyah, that's not a jama'ah. It's a time period. So when people see a Salafi after this name, it's talking about a time, that someone's adhering to that time, not a sect.
Right.
Not a sect, because all of them have madhhabs after their names. So it's clear they're not talking about a sect. Imam al-Zahabi's buried in the Shafi'i graveyard. Taqi ibn Taymiyyah was buried in Maqbaratu Sufiya, the Sufi graveyard and crypt. In the Hanbali section, this is what the reality is. No one has this misgiving. The Dar al-Hadith al-Sukuriya was the Hadith station and preaching post for the Hanabila. It's clear what he came up under and what he continued to teach, and the kutub that he taught people. These things have to be kept in perspective, that people belong to a time period, a discipline, and methodology. Now, it's not to say that I'm anywhere near these people, but it's just as an example. If somehow someone later on down the line was teaching about me and did not mention my madhhab at all, that's a complete misrepresentation.
SubhanAllah.
It's a complete misrepresentation. Yeah, Brother Jafri just taught Bulugh al-Maram, and he taught these other things. Yeah, so what books in fiqh to do? Well, he taught these books in fiqh, but we just follow the evidence. Well, no, that's not what I taught.
SubhanAllah.
That's not what I taught. I belonged to a set of disciplines, and I could be held accountable for those things. So if I veer and stray off the track, people can say, oh, well, is that the ruling in the school? Well, there's 2 rulings, and I'm following this one because I can't do the Mu'tamid because I've got sciatica or whatever else. Oh, okay. But if I veer off and there's nothing in the schools, I can be held strong. Well, wait a minute, hold on. Why are you veering off like this? Well, I can't because I have to take a ruling from another school because I've got this unique illness or I've got this issue. So one of my teachers, he had an issue where he had a problem with his arms. So he had to wipe over his socks. He had to wipe over socks, which is, he was a Shafi'i. This is not tenable in the Shafi'i method. But he wiped over his socks because he had to borrow that ruling because of his unique health circumstances. And there were other issues that he had to do. So that's understandable. And all of us knew that when we saw, oh yeah, alhamdulillah, he's doing that. We all get that. But when somebody when somebody comes to a strange conclusion and then we can't hold them, well, where'd you get this from? Well, it's from Book and Sunnah. Okay, well, who understood it this way? Well, I told you, I gave you the evidence. Well, yeah, you gave me the evidence, but the understanding of this, where'd you get this understanding? If we can't hold you accountable and can't hold you responsible for, well, what, do we have another prophet in our midst? Because even before Imams, they were leaning back on the tabi'een that they learned from. They're absolute mujtahids, but they belong to a group of companions that they came out of. So then when somebody's coming, it's like, okay, well, who are your companions? In this era, who are your companions? But people want to be like this big island by themselves, but then when they get in trouble, they say, oh yeah, I found this problem and that problem. Well, what did you do that for? Well, I saw this, I saw that, I feel this, I feel that. How did we get here? Because this is certainly not the case of Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, because he made it very clear. He said the Sharia cannot be found outside of the four madhhabs. He said this twice in volume 10 and volume 11 of Majmu' Fatawa. The Sharia is not found outside of four madhhabs.
Yes.
So then what does that mean? That he's firmly placed inside of it doesn't mean that sometimes I look at him, sometimes I don't. No, that's where you belong to. But people are having these arguments, and so sometimes it can be frustrating when you look at these august personalities and people they examine them through almost a secular lens, like an atheistic lens. These people weren't atheists. You know, Taqi ibn Taymiyyah wasn't over in Damascus and then Ibn Kathir was way over here and they were unconnected. No, these people were all connected. These people of knowledge are all connected. They're either connected by blood or they're connected by ilm. Like the Katani family are connected to Shaykh Abdullah Sufyan al-Qudumi. They're connected to him through Jafar al-Katani, Muhammad Jafar. And you have to remember, Imam Abdullah Sufyan al-Qudumi, rahimahullah, he had 500 students. 500. These people are connected. So when you transmit Al-Jami al-Saghir by Imam al-Suyuti, Abdullah Sufyan al-Qudumi's name is in the Senate chain. It's in the Senate chain. Because he transmitted.
Yes.
The Katanis transmit through Abdullah Sufyan al-Qudumi. They transmit. They made Hajj with him.
MashaAllah.
When he went to 1317, 1318, they made Hajj with him. So they brought his Senads from Palestine back to Morocco with them, because the Katanis are Moroccans.
Yeah.
They brought it back with them.
MashaAllah.
And so a whole new world of people got to share, and it helped flower because they always have been strong in Hadith, but it's like it repollinated it. These people are all connected. So when we look at Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, the Imam rahimahullah, we have to look at him in perspective of who he is and what he represents.
Since we are mentioning his methodology and everything else, the students who were taken from him, did they make a particular statement on that his method, meaning is not really fully in line to madhhab due to his ijtihadat? Did they disassociate with him due to this? Like, what did the students say about these things?
Okay. Alhamdulillah. If someone goes through the Tafsir ibn Kathir, known as Tafsir al-Quran al-Azim, by Imam Imaduddin al-Kathir. Imam Taqi ibn Taymiyyah rahimahulah's position on certain ayat in terms of their tafsir application, it's absent from Ibn Kathir's tafsir. It's absent. Ibn al-Qayyim, the Imam rahimahullah, when he'll often cite a statement from Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, and he'll say, "Was sahihu," but the authentic is this. They're aware of his statements, but they'll say, "But the sahih is this," or they'll cite his statement in the beginning, and they'll say, "But the ruling is this." Well, sahu had, but the most authentic is this. Okay. They're aware of his statements.
Sure. Yeah.
But the adab that you have with the scholars is you cite the literature by saying, "But the authentic position is this," or the clear, like for example, we know the only one in the history of the school that said the hands above the navel is Shaikh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani. Now, Imam Alauddin al-Mardari rahimahullah in Al-Insaf says that the right hand is on the left below the navel. وَعَلَيْهِ جَمَاهِيرُ الْعُلَمَاء or جَمَاهِيرُ الْأَصْحَابِ. And upon this is the overwhelming preponderance of the companions. Overwhelming jamahir means there'd only be one person in difference. But he didn't mention Shaykh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani. Now, that's both to show that opinion is not, it's not recorded, it's not the dependent upon, but it's also to show adab. Because because you can't say it's ijma.
Yes.
Because that wouldn't be truthful. Because it would mean that Shaykh Abu Ja is going against, just running contrary to everything. And that's not true. But it's also saying, listen, this is the dependent upon ruling. There's an adab with how these things are done when you differ. There's an adab. And there's a way that the adab al-khilaf, there's a way that you differ with scholars. Even when they're mistaken, they're ijtihad, there's a way that it's done. And a way that it has to be done. In a fashion in which the reader can see, so this ruling is interesting because it's novel, but it's not to be followed. But just know that that's there. It's also sometimes there is a nadir ruling because in case you can't do the mu'tamad or some issue happens. Look, this is here. I found myself in this circumstance and I couldn't do the mu'tamad because this, but I've got this. Or sometimes there'll be a statement where he's the only one that's pronounced on it. Which says murajjih because he's combined together two things. Oh, look, I've got this. He's pronounced on it. So sometimes there'll be that. So it's understanding that where he may have been the only one who spoke on a statement.
And this is actually also why I'm saying his students, because if the people of today are taking his books, they're just selecting whatever they want, but they're not really, like you say, looking at the complete works methodology. What have students laid down? What have they said about his works and books? That's being completely ignored.
It has to be. You have to put the Imam in his proper perspective, right? You have Ibn al-Liham, rahimahullah, who died 803 Hijri. He went through the Majmu'ah Fatawa and everything else, and boiled everything down to one volume. Called Ikhtiyarat من فتاوى الشيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية. الاختيارات الفقهية من مجموعة فتاوى الشيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية. That's the name of the book. It's one adult fist thick manual that's okay. This is everything boiled down. This is what we can make use of. That everything is, he's truncated everything down. Now, where did he get this from? Well, he is one of the students, along with Ibn Muflih of Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, rahimahullah. Okay, well, Ibn Muflih studied from Taqi ibn Taymiyyah. Oh, okay. So Ibn Rajab studied from Ibn al-Qayyim, who was a student of Taqi ibn Taymiyyah. So he had access to two people who had access to Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, one directly and one through someone who was directly.
Mm-hmm.
So they most certainly would have assisted in his knowing what needed to be leaned upon and gleaned from.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
To boil it down into this kitab.
Oh.
So when you apply all of that knowledge, then you understand in books like Badai' al-Fawaid by Ibn al-Qayyim. He'll cite Barmaki and Taqi ibn Taymiyyah and other authors previous and post Taqi ibn Taymiyyah. And you also have to recognize that you'll have the rulings of the school, what's been depended upon.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have Taqi ibn Taymiyyah's rulings. Then after Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, the rulings stay the same.
Okay.
What that means is they've not taken it off.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You have the entire madhhab saying from first three generations, Imam Ahmad, 3 divorces in one sitting is 3 talaq.
Mm-hmm.
You get the confusion from the time of Taqi ibn Taymiyyah. After Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, 3 divorces in one sitting is 3 talaq. Nothing's changed.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's changed.
Exactly.
We're not transmitting that. Wipe over your hooves and take them off and nullify. We're not transmitting that. We're just not. We're not transmitting that. It'll be in the other books where it's quoted. Listen, this has been said, but the sahih is this. Oh, okay. We're not transmitting that. It's understanding these things and paying close attention. When you grasp that, they're showing respect to the Imam. But showing respect to him is also putting him in his right context.
Exactly.
That's showing respect as well to all the other worthies and greats that came before him by not being trapped in that prison. But best to understand, he was a towering Imam. He has some insightful statements that he's made.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, not that I'm anyone to be cited from or follow in this regard, but I think his most insightful works are his works on Tasawwuf, volumes 10 and 11 of Majmu' Fatawa. I think that's some of his most insightful work, and his Sharh on Futuh al-Ghaib by Shaikh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani. I think that's really insightful. I think that's some of his best work. Myself.
In Tasawwuf, would you then say that all of his material in Tasawwuf is sound?
Yeah, he's brilliant. His application of the corruption of the tariqahs and how it happened, the lying teachers versus the righteous teachers, azkar, good character. There's nothing in there where he put a foot wrong. And there's nothing in there where he put a foot wrong or where he, and then you have also him and the silsila.
Right.
Which again brings more questions.
Yes.
Not for me. I never have any questions about the Imam. I have questions about it. But it brings questions for people who claim that they're connected to Shaikh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani rahimahullah. Because if you're connected to him, then you have a new issue. Because how is it that Shamsuddin al-Qudama somehow missed the mark? Ibn Rajab missed the mark. Ibn al-Mabrid, all these people have handed him down through the chain and not dropped it. Mudallis or a corrupter or anything like that. Because at the time that he took it, it was the time that a lot of the stuff was going on.
Yeah.
So it'd be different if he was, 10 or 12. But at the time that he's in the most contention is when he took it, the tariqah. So now this is an issue for both revilers and sycophants.
Yeah.
For the revilers, you have to ask, did you know this? Well, where's your proof? Then we start citing proofs, and they're dumbfounded. Then for the sycophants, did you know this? sycophant, well, I don't accept it. No, it doesn't matter whether you accept it. What matters is the historical fact. You can say, I don't accept that the sun's 93 million miles from Earth. Okay. But listen, do you understand that photosynthesis is part of it as a result of the sun?
Mm-hmm.
You don't got to like it. So you got to know that it's there. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the fact that that's the reality? Because there's nothing you can say. It's staring you in the face through not just being transmitted through Ibn Rajab, but it's transmitted, that statement is transmitted through Ibn al-Mabrid. It's transmitted through the original Ibn Abdul Hadi, who died 744 Hijri, who was also a student of Ibn Taymiyyah, Taqi. So how do you deal with that? We got 3-4 narrators who are stating the same thing. What are you going to do with that? For me, I don't have any contradiction. But if you live in a world of, it can only be like this, how are you going to function?
So we can say we have authentic chains, him being in the chain of the Qadiri Tariqah, basically.
Yes.
And this can't be refuted.
So we have to ask, what are you going to do about this?
Right.
Yeah, we're going to ask, what are you going to do? This is why I included that in the Bada Labis Tasawwuf, in the life and times of Umar al-Maqdisi.
Yeah.
If you look in there under the 6 motives, he's under motive number 5 of the silsila. And he explains how he came to take the tariqah. And he's very proud of how there's only so many people between him and Shaikh Abu Ja.
Subhanallah.
That's in the Kitab.
MashaAllah.
That's part of why I put that in there, so that people could have that as a source to understand the linkage between Taqi ibn Taymiyyah as well as Abu Umar al-Maqdisi, Shaykh Abu Ja, these other elders. What's the linkage between them?
And so if somebody presents a Qadiri chain, but it doesn't have, let's say, Imam Shamsuddin al-Qudam, it doesn't have Imam Taqiyuddin, what
we have questions.
Right.
It means we have questions. More so for them than anything.
Subhanallah.
Because where did you get this from? If I recite your father's lineage, but I keep dropping you from it, what are the odds that that's right?
Subhanallah.
I keep dropping you. Where's Brother Iskandar? Yeah, we got different chains. Okay, but something doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
I keep mentioning someone else named Abdul Haq. Who is Abdul Haq? Who is Haq? Don't know.
The regular
these are the issues.
Yeah, exactly.
Because now, if you build your whole house upon falsehood, it will come down because of that. But for people who are really sincere, they'll start to ask those type of questions. And they'll start to say, something doesn't seem right here. When they'll start to ask questions that a man who we have more available knowledge about his life than Tony Blair or Winston Churchill, that how you're trying to surround him with so much mist and dust when we have so much information about him. So how would you know this? Then we have Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, Imam rahimahullah, who again, we've had a huge amount of knowledge about his life and what he represents, how many times he was in Majalis, what he was in Majalis for. Why are you bringing out all this other stuff? That wasn't why he was even in the Majalis for. Some of the opinions that he had that are later being brought out, those are private books that he had that didn't really see the light of day. Some, because you have to remember when he died, he was in prison, and his books were brought out with him after he died, and they were handed over to his relatives. So now people are going through that stuff today. You have to be a sick individual to go out and buy that, sit down and subject yourself to that, or to subject yourself to sit down and look for errors in a book for the sake of just finding errors.
Yes.
Like that says something about something inside of you. Because I've I wouldn't be doing that if I was looking at Taqi ibn Taymiyyah's kutub. Like if I had like his whole written legacy, I've got an electronic copy of Majmu' Fatawa, and mainly I read from the 2 volumes on Tasawwuf, his Ilm al-Suluk and Ilm al-Tasawwuf. But I wouldn't just be going through there just looking for, okay, I got to find something wrong. Got to find something wrong. You'd have to have a pretty diseased heart, a really diseased heart. And a lot of the things that Taqi ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, I think, is above the head of a lot of these people that are reading through here as well. Because again, he's not writing for the rank and file. So I think some of what he's written, I think, is even above the head of some of these people. And what's happening is they're digging a bigger hole for themselves. Like if you had them explain, like Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, like his understanding on tahdid al-safar, like the delineation of what is safar and why he thinks that safar isn't a distance at all, and his understanding about the qullatayn, because he has some rare and random rulings about the qullatayn, right? And why that is. Most people couldn't explain to you that call themselves whether they're revilers or sycophants. Most of them couldn't tell you why he feels that way about the narrators, why that's the case, why, and why did he say this narrator here is munkar al-hadith, but this one's not. But now we have one statement from one book of Jarh wa Ta'dil that says munkar al-hadith. Another one says it's acceptable, it's maqbool. Why is that? Why? There's so many wrinkles to the discussion on Jarh wa Ta'dil in terms of being able to understand the discussion, but there's all this background information that you need to have to even understand that there's something afoot. You need to first of all have background knowledge to even know that something's afoot. But then what you do is you translate it without any footnotes, without any notes, without any background, without any context. So now it's in English. There's people running around that think that, so there's people thinking, travel is, if you just think that it was a difficult journey or whatever else. Wait a minute, hold on. Where'd you get that? I read it in this book somewhere. I'll go home and show you. No. You need to know this now. Because it's not like the difference between is Joe DiMaggio or Pete Rose the greatest of all time in baseball. This is something you built your whole life on top of. Because if you're mistaken, it's like, all right, how many salahs have you done like this? Because that's the next question we have to ask.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's
so wait a minute, hold on. How many salahs have you been doing like this? Oh, for the past 2 years. Okay, listen, man, you gotta go back on that. Yeah, but in Allah Ghafur Rahim. Yeah, but he's also Shadid al-Iqab. There's no ignorance in this area is not excusable when you knew better and you were supposed to not do that. You're not supposed to do that. Well, that's what I took away from my understanding. Well, your understanding was wrong. Yeah, but Allah doesn't burden the soul. Morgan, that hadith has nothing to do with that. That hadith does that ayah or the hadith that sometimes has a similar wording has nothing to do with Allah won't burden the soul more than take. Because I've seen people get broken. Allah's put something on them and they've just fallen apart. That ayah has nothing to do with that. It means that Allah won't make you responsible for some stuff that you're not responsible for. That's what that means. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be given some stuff you can't handle, because plenty of people given more than they can handle.
Subhanallah.
That's why at the end of Baqarah they ask, "Oh Allah, don't give us more than we can handle."
Allahu Akbar.
So that's what that dua is for.
Exactly.
That's what that dua is for.
Subhanallah.
That's why you had to. Please don't put something on me that's too much for me to deal with.
Subhanallah.
But this is part of that issue. So in the transfer of information from the Arabic into the receptor language, which in this case is English, you're losing information. Then there's no attempt to try to put back what was lost. Some of these books and translations, there's not even biography. There's not even a biography about the Imam. There's not even some of these books that there's not even a how to use this book.
It just shows you the intention behind it then.
There's no how to use this book. It's not even like how did we translate this book? Like, how do we translate it? How do we come to a conclusion to translate this book? Why did we translate this book? Who is the author and what makes it so important? Then you have the ayat citations. Okay, are the ayat cited in the proper citation? Are the ahadith, have those been cited? Okay, if it's a weak hadith, if he says the hadith is da'if, what do it mean is da'if? Does it mean da'if can't use it? Or it's da'if that we can use it, but it has to be cited with other ahadith? Like what happened here? But the discussion doesn't get had here. And it's unfortunate, which is another thing I included in the back. Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, his presentation on the use of weak hadith. Because Shamsuddin Mufid rahimahullah has a whole quote. I think it must be 5 pages I put back there on the life and times of Umar Muqtasi. And he quotes something from Taqi ibn Taymiyyah on the use of weak hadith, which really puts everything in context regarding the use of da'if hadith.
These are all methodologies.
And these are all principles and methodologies. And when you look at, like, for example, Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, he's kind of a maverick in usul al-Tafsir, because his methodology for explaining, like sometimes the word shafa'a and the shar, he'll hold this linguistic meaning over the shari meaning to prove his point. But you have to understand when that's being done. But there's people that have taken that as, okay, that's the end of the discussion. But it's not the end, though. It's not the end, though. So part of what I hope this will be for, what we're doing is to try to put Taqi ibn Taymiyyah back in the centermost piece. Not with the revilers and not with the sycophants. Because he doesn't belong to either party. He's his own man. And truth be told, if he was alive, neither of these people would be able to sit with him. Because the gatherings that he was in and the people that he taught, neither of these groups could sit with him. They just couldn't.